everyone. My name is Liana Canton. I'm the founding editor-in-chief of Accenti Magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to Accenti's Countering Isolation with Creativity, a project made possible through the financial support of Employment and Social Development Canada as part of the New Horizons Seniors Program. This is the fifth workshop in a series of 10. So welcome to Liana Cusmano's Writing and Sharing Spoken Word Poems. I'm really looking forward to it. For those of you who may not know Liana, Liana is also known as Luca and by Curious George. Liana Cusmano uses they, them, il in French and lu Italian pronouns. Liana is a poet and spoken word artist. They are the author of the new novel recently released in June, Catch and Released, published by Guernica. Liana is twice Montreal Slam Champion. Liana is also fiction editor at Carte, Blanche magazine and associate editor at Accenti Magazine. So welcome, Liana. Over to you.
Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. Thank you for coming. I'm really excited to be giving this poetry workshop with you. I think we're going to have a wonderful time. I'm going to start just by saying very quickly that I'm in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, and unceded Mohawk territory. It's very easy to rattle off land acknowledgements in Canada. So what I'm going to do is at the end of the workshop, I'll put some resources down at the bottom. There are numbers that you can text that will tell you exactly what land you're on. I think it's important to acknowledge who we are and where we come from, and also where we are in the space that we take up. So you may all know this. Spoken word poetry is poetry that is written with the intention of it being performed. And the basis for the poetry that we're going to be writing today is going to be memory, individual memories and our own individual memories. That being said, one of the reasons spoken word poetry is popular is because it's very accessible. There are very few rules. You don't need specific training. You don't need a diploma. You don't need specific technology or technological skills. If you haven't, I would encourage all of you at least once, see how you like it, to go to a poetry slam. Poetry readings and poetry slams are a little bit different. Poetry slams have an element of competition to them, and they're some of the most dynamic and welcoming environments I've ever been to. And that was really what encouraged me to write spoken word poetry, was going to places where spoken word was front and center and seeing how engaging and emotional and connective it was as an art form. So if there's one thing I want everyone to keep in mind is that you cannot do this wrong. It's difficult as we get older to let go of our own judgment and our own fear of not being good enough, especially when we write about ourselves or we write about memory or we write anything. I call it, in workshops like these, and when you write, there's a need for the suspension of disbelief in the self. Don't think too much about your own skill or whether or not it'll be good or whatever. Just do it. If you never write anything, you don't have anything to edit, and then you'll be stuck. So there's no such thing as a silly question. We're not here to judge one another or to critique one another. We're just here to write. So I was thinking we could go around. Everyone can give their names, their pronouns if they like, something interesting about yourself, or what brought you here today. So I'm Liana, I use they, them pronouns. We were talking about winters before in Calabria and Montreal. My brand new luminotherapy lamp arrived yesterday in preparation for Montreal's winter. It came in a huge box. I have a rabbit. The rabbit is going to love this box. So I'm going to like the lamp and she's going to like the box. Who would like to introduce themselves?
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Romano Milne. I use the pronoun she, her. I started getting into poetry just in the last year or so during the pandemic. Did a wonderful workshop here in Ottawa with my colleague Catherine Taylor, who's on the call as well. And yeah, wanted to learn more about the spoken word part of it, partly as a connection to my interest in writing poetry in Italian dialect, because I think that needs to be spoken to really get the emotional part of it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anna.
Thank you, Anna. Sorry, Dominic, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm the Catherine that Anna referenced, and yes, we did a workshop together in the late spring. And I'm a she, her, and I'm a page poet, although I've had opportunity to present my poetry, and I always get terrible stage fright. I've been to several spoken word festivals, and I'm very much taken by the wonder of what's being written and presented. So I'd like to become more familiar with it, although it's hard to say this, but I'm a retired person, and I sometimes feel that perhaps I'm coming very late to certain things. However, I figure if you're alive, you're alive. So keep learning, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
I'm Eleanor Binstock. I am a Montrealer, but I lived in Chicago for 50 years, just got back 2 years ago. That's a terrific city for rap and slams, and it's very vigorous. I think the term house music was originated in Chicago. Very dynamic city. Anyway, but in my own experience, I wrote poetry when I was younger, but I don't do that so much. And I'm interested in it because it's got a sort of a nerve center that prose does not have. And I'm a nervous person. Well, not really, kind of. So, and I did a dissertation while I was there, and I'm now a retired professor, and I was working with Black teenagers, dropouts, and part of my data was recording their talk with each other, and as I had their talk I recorded their talk, and then I had it translated, transformed into written text. And when I looked at the text and I started writing about it, it fell into meter. And I've never stopped feeling astonished about that experience, about that kind of talk. So I'm looking forward to this workshop. See what I could do.
Thanks, Eleanor.
I'm Caterina Amoruso, and I'd like to relate myself to what Catherine Taylor said. I'm also a person that started kind of late in writing and picking up on poetry. Actually, poetry, I really haven't experimented too much in that field. So I'm really keen on doing this workshop. As a young adult, I was trying to write, and then I just dropped everything. I mean, at times life just brings you to make certain decisions. You take certain paths, and then I guess at an older age with more experience, you realize that it's important to write and to pick up on that dimension. So I'm really happy to participate in all these workshops. Thank you.
Thanks, Caterina.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vanessa. I use she, her, and I'm a student of English literature at the University of Padua. And basically, I'm here to learn and kind of relate to everybody's stories. So that's all for me.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Dominic, did you want to?
Well, I just want to say that I'm a professional writer in the sense that I write for the magazine that we publish at Accenti, and I've written essays, I've written journalistic pieces, I write for other publications as well in prose. poetry is one thing that frightens me. It frightens me very much. I can tell good poetry when I read it. I can't reproduce it. So I'm here to find out more about what makes poetry tick, if I can.
Thank you, Dominic. So I have incredible stage fright as well. I'm a writer, primarily a short story writer, but every once in a while, I write a poem, usually in dialect. That's the way it is. So I would like to learn a little bit more about spoken word and maybe work on my stage fright.
All right, thank you. Maria Pia, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. So my pronouns is she, her. Why I'm here, I'm fascinated by spoken word poetry, but at the same time, I think that the first genre in which I wrote when I was a baby, when I was a little girl, is poetry. So yes, if I have to, and I better express myself in poems rather than in narratives, novels, and some. So yeah, and I'm fascinated by this workshop. Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks very much, everyone, for sharing. I'm really glad to be here with all of you. All right, so I'll show all of you a very short spoken word poem. It's one of my favorites, and it deals a lot with the concept of memory and where we come from. Again, you know, the premise of the workshop is working from what you know and yourself and your memory, but it's not a strict instruction. You write about whatever you like, however you like, and, you know, and approach it however you like. It's just a little bit less intimidating sometimes to have a little bit of guidance. And so if you need that guidance, keep trying to bring it back to yourself, your experience, your memory. So, and this poem is a little bit about that. Can everyone see? Okay.
Yes.
All right, here we go.
One, my mother and I don't have dinner table conversations out of courtesy. We don't want to remind each other of our accents. Her voice is a Vietnamese lullaby sung to an empty bed. The taste of her hometown still kicking in the back of her teeth. My voice is bleach. My voice has no history. My voice is the ringing of an empty picture frame, the frequency of a TV turned off. Two, my birth name is Hugh Wing, but today I don't know myself as anything other than Huey, and Hugh is sitting in preschool trying to say the word orange, to say the word bathroom, to say home, to say friend, and today I'm forgetting how to say the simple things to my mother. The words that linger in my periphery is a rearview mirror dangling from the wires. I am only fluent in apologies. Three, when I look at my childhood photos, the ones taken by my mother, I have to remind myself that in that moment, I understood her. That in that moment, I knew what she was saying. She was saying, smile. Four, my mother's favorite television shows are all 90s sitcoms. The ones with laugh tracks, the pre-recorded emotion to cue her when to laugh. Five, in the first grade, I mastered my tongue. I cleaned my speech, and during parent-teacher conferences, the teacher was surprised that my mother was Asian. She just assumed I was adopted. She assumed that this voice was the same one I started out with. Six, sometimes when I watch home movies, I don't even understand myself. My childhood is a foreign film. All of my favorite memories have been dubbed in English. Seven, as she holds a pair of chopsticks, a friend asks me why I am using a fork. I tell her it's much easier. She says in a voice the same octave as my grandmother, she says, but this is so much cooler. Eight, I am a fortune cookie. I am an American flag made in China. I am Lian Chin. I am Panda Express. I am white paint. I can still feel the brushstrokes on the roof of my mouth. Nine, in Vietnamese, the name Hugh means pious. It means devotion. It means tradition. It means understanding. In English, the name Huey means nothing. 10, I've accepted the fact that I am no longer Vietnamese, just Asian. I am just the clip art, the poster boy of whitewash. My skin has been burning easier these days. My voice box is shrinking. I have rinsed it out too many times. My house is a silent film. My house is infested with subtitles. 11, that's all. That's all. Nothing else to say.
So there's a lot going on in that spoken word piece. There's the way the piece is written. So there are a lot of metaphors. There are a lot of similes. You know, my memories are dubbed in
When I
English.
talk about the last 6 months of my
Oh,
junior year.
my bad. Sorry about that. There are a lot of metaphors. There's a lot of I am Panda Express. The roof of my mouth is coated in white. And there's so much imagery there. So there's the way that the poem is written and there's the way the poem is performed. And we're going to be doing the performance aspect closer to the end. But there are the volume, the range and volume was very great. The range and speed. There was a range and speed. There were hand gestures as well. The poem was written in list form, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think it was 7, 8, up to 10. And there was something called the spoken word voice. Which is something that you sort of pick up and that you notice in spoken word circles. I think especially when Hugh was going from the end of one list item to the next. And then I did this 9 and that pause didn't exist. So those are all small stylistic and creative choices that each individual spoken word poet makes. And we're going to be coming back to things like that. But that's something to keep in mind when it comes to spoken word is what you write and then how you decide to perform it. Okay, so we're going to start writing with a writing exercise that has been used in the past as a personality test, which is like pseudoscience and doesn't really mean that much. I think it's very interesting as a writing exercise. It's something that's been used by poets that I know in workshops that I've taken with them. So I'm going to be giving you all small writing prompts and giving you, 30 seconds a minute for each one. And then we're going to do the analysis. So again, these are writing prompts or writing exercise based on you as an individual, and you can draw from this for the poetry that you're going to write. The stage that we're at right now is the gathering information to put down on the page type of stage. All right. So what I want everybody to do is make sure that you have something to write with. And I want you to imagine an open field and describe it. How big is the field? What are the surroundings like? Is there grass in the field? Is the grass long, short, burnt, green? You're in an open field. Describe it. All right, wrap up your description of the field. There's multiple steps to this and they're all going to be short. Don't worry too much about, syntax or punctuation or anything like that. So we have a field. Now I want everyone to think of a cube in the field. Imagine a cube. Write down the first thing that comes to mind. How big is the cube? What is it made of? What is the surface like? Is it smooth? Is it rough? What color is it? Where is it in the field? Is it far away from you? Is it close to you? Is the cube on the ground? Is it floating? Is it transparent? So think of a cube in the field and describe it. Let your mind wander and write down what your thoughts are. Describe the cube in the field. All right, we have a cube in a field. The next thing is a ladder. Imagine a ladder. How long is it? How many steps? What's it made of? Where is it located in your field? And where is it in relation to the cube? Is it close? Is it far? Are they stuck together? Imagine a ladder in your field with the cube. So we have a field with a cube and a ladder. Now there is a horse. Imagine a horse in your field. What color is it? Where is it in relation to the cube? And what is it doing? Is it standing around? Is it lying down? Is it calm? Is it taking a nap? Imagine a horse in your field. Describe it. We've got just a few more. In the field, there are flowers. Where are the flowers in your field? How many are there? Are they close together? Are they all spread out? What kind of flowers are they? Imagine flowers in your field and describe them. So those were the flowers. Now describe the weather in your field. What is the weather like? Is it sunny? Is there fog? Is it rainy? Is there wind blowing? Describe the weather in the field. And the last thing in the field is a storm. Describe a storm in the field. Is it far away from the cube? Is it on the horizon? Is it a big storm? Is it a small storm? Is there thunder and lightning? Is it just passing through? Imagine a storm in the field and describe it. And that's it. So everyone should have a field, a cube, a ladder, a horse, flowers, weather, and a storm. So keep in mind, this is a writing exercise. The point is just to have prompts and to write things down, to use your imagination. This is something that you can pull from and borrow from when we start writing the poem. This could be your poem if you decide. So the field, apparently, the field represents your mind. Its size is representative of your knowledge of the world, how big your mind, your personality is. So the condition of the field says something about your mind. If the grass is dry and dead, maybe you're a little, on the pessimistic side. If there's a lot of long grass, lots of different kinds of grasses, maybe you're a little bit more optimistic. If it's well trimmed, if somebody took a lawnmower to it, maybe you're rigid or analytical or what have you. So that's the field. The cube is you. The size of the cube is your ego. The surface of the cube represents what is observable about your personality, what you present out to others. The texture of the cube is also significant. That apparently represents, your nature, the kind of person that you are. So if it's smooth, maybe you're like a gentle, easygoing person. If it's rough, maybe you're straightforward, you're more honest, you don't hold back. If it's bumpy or spiky, maybe you're more liberal in your criticism. And of course, colors all mean something different. So if your cube is red, maybe you enjoy rich sensory experiences. If it's yellow, you're sociable. If it's blue, you're intelligent and respect other people's ideas. If it's white, then you're kind and independent. All of these things, all of this stuff is, I think some psychologists put this together. But what I like about it is that everyone will write something a little bit different, and you can interpret it in lots of different ways. But it's always interesting, I think, to get an instruction and to write something down and to see, ooh, this is apparently what this says about me. And sometimes you'll be surprised by how, okay, this doesn't make any sense. And other things are like, oh, this is interesting. The point is to get you to think a little bit about the things that jump into your head, and how you write them down and the way that you express them. The ladder represents your goals. If your ladder is short, your goals are short-term, realistic, simple. If the ladder is long, then maybe your goals are longer, more far-fetched, it takes longer to get there. If the ladder is close to the cube, then you're closely aligned with your goals. If it's far away, maybe it'll take longer to get there. Maybe they're a little bit more complicated. The horse represents your partner or one of the most important people in your life. So if the horse is playing, if the horse is running around, if the horse is sleeping or relaxed, all of these things supposedly mean something different about the person you spend a great deal of time with or your partner. If the horse is brown, that's comfort and reliability. If it's black, that's sophistication. If it's white, then the horse and the partner are exceptionally loyal. The flowers represent your family and your friends. So if there are lots of flowers, that means something. If there are few flowers, that means something else. There are just a few flowers all, close to the cube or underneath the cube. Your family ties and your friendship ties are very close and very selective. If there are many and they're all over the place, then your social network is a little bit more expansive. The weather condition is your general outlook on life. So if it's sunny, you have a sunny disposition. If it's rainy, maybe things are not going so well. If you don't like rain, if you do like rain and your field is rainy, then maybe things are going well for you. If it's foggy, maybe there's a little bit of uncertainty. The storm is a reflection of the stresses that you feel in your life. So if the storm is just passing through, then, you take things in stride. I think when I first did this exercise, my description was the storm is everywhere. And so that was, and it's fun to do this exercise with young writers as well. They'll say, what does it mean if the storm is constant and there's thunder and lightning? And I'll be like, well, you have exams coming up. That's what that is. And of course, the storm's relation to the cube, is it right on top of the cube? Is it far away? Is it strong? Is it a small storm? All of that means something a little bit different. All right. So the next writing exercise that we're going to do brings us a little bit closer to the poem that we're going to start crafting on the page. So what I want everyone to do is to write, and you can be inspired by what we just wrote. Maybe it put you in a specific mindset. If you also want to leave it behind, that's also okay. There are no rules here. So I want everyone to write 3 sentences about a happy memory. Could be anything. 3 sentences about a happy memory. It could be, it was Sunday, I was eating toast with my kids, and there was a squirrel on the telephone pole. They could also be long sentences. It's up to you. So 3 sentences about a happy memory. I find that a lot of us write poetry specifically to process things that can be difficult. Some of the most challenging poems to write are the happy ones. That said, writing about something that's angry or frightening or sad can also be challenging, because to make it good, or to make it good to you, or to make it realistic or impactful, you have to re-inhabit that experience to make it authentic to the person who's going to hear your spoken word or who's going to read your poem. So the next sentence, or the next bit, is 3 sentences about a sad memory. If you'd like to skip this, by all means, skip it. And at the same time, I want to challenge all of you to engage with any feelings that might be coming up, and to then decide whether or not you would like to use those feelings to make poetry out of. So 3 sentences about a sad memory. And now 3 sentences about an angry memory. And the last 3 sentences about a scary memory. So 3 sentences about a time that was frightening. Give you a few more seconds to wrap up. All right. How's everyone doing? Did everyone do a deep dive back into their memories? All right. So the next thing I would like everyone to do is to abandon any preconceived notions of what a poem is. There are certain, codes and conventions or certain standards, but when you're first writing something, they can become limitations. So all of my poems, for example, all of my spoken word poems are blocks on the page. There are no paragraph breaks. I sent the poems into a publication one time and they wrote back and said, we cannot accept this. This is not poetry. This is flash fiction. And my world turned upside down. So what I challenge all of you to do now is to build a poem based on a memory. What this means is that you can write about whatever you like, but usually a memory, especially perhaps one of the ones that you've just written a few sentences about, is going to be very strong and prominent in your mind. So I would like you to pick a memory. It could be one of the ones you wrote about, it could be something different, and just describe it. Just describe what it was like to be there. If you had to bring someone with you back in time with your words to show them what that memory was, what would you say? If the memory was a photograph, what would be in the memory? So pick a memory and describe it. You can lean very heavily on the 5 senses. I'll put them in the chat for you. Everything that you saw, that you smelled, that you heard, that you tasted, or that you touched. So right now, you're just describing a memory. The poem will be in what you've written. You just have to find it. So I'll give everyone about 10 minutes. This is full on. You're just putting words down on the paper. You can take your time. You can build it slowly if you like. You can dump it all on the page and then edit after. But travel back to a point in time in your life and then render it, put it on the page with as much detail as possible. Hi, everyone. Put a thumbs up if you would like 5 more minutes. Okay. How's everyone doing? Does anyone want to share just the subject of what they're writing about? I personally am working on a poem about biking around in the city and all the tiny little moments of biking around in the city, like being on Clark on a Tuesday and it's garbage day and it's raining and it smells like wet garbage, or being on Mount Royal and all the colors that are there. So the challenge I'm facing in this poem is pulling everything together so it's not just random bits that are all disjointed. So that's what I'm working on.
It's funny, Liana, I wrote about my bike as well. But not the one I'm writing now, the one my father bought me when I was 13.
I would read that poem. Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Should I have a go at it?
Let's ask if anybody else would like to share what they're writing about. Otherwise, I would say yes, absolutely. I would like to hear it. Is anyone writing about their childhoods? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you have other people in what you're writing about? Okay. Okay, almost everyone. Okay. All right. How many of you are writing about the place where you currently live? No one. Okay. Wow. Okay, a little bit. Okay, Katerina, a little bit. All right. So we'll have a moment to share. Dominic, if you'd like to share, and then we'll talk a little bit about the literary tools that you have at your disposal. Go ahead.
No one wants to go?
Does anybody else want to go?
I'm getting scared.
I can go. Would that be helpful if I went?
That's okay. I'll give it a shot.
Okay,
I'll give
go
it a
ahead.
shot.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
it's very short. I'm not sure it's a poem. In fact, I know it's not a poem. It's more
I
like
hear that all the time. I'm not sure
more
this is
like
a poem.
it's a prose piece.
Very
So
good.
here goes. I was 13 the first time I rode my bike down a hill, feeling the acceleration caused by the pull of gravity and the wind blowing against my face. I had never felt so free. The bicycle was an old refurbished 3-speed that my father bought at a cluttered and dingy bicycle shop in Little Italy, where we had lived for nearly a decade before we moved to the more upscale neighborhood of St. Leonard. Some would argue that moving to the suburbs was actually downward mobility, but not my mother and father. They were glad to trade the cockroach-infested, nearly windowless second-floor apartment on a busy street over a restaurant for a spacious 2-story house with a yard that they could turn into a vegetable garden. As for my brother and me, now we could ride our bikes in the relative safety of the wide avenues of the neighborhood, nearly devoid of cars. That's it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I can see it. The imagery is very, very clear. Thanks for sharing. All right. What I've noticed, and everybody's a little bit different, but what I've noticed sets poetry apart from prose or from other kinds of writing is what makes it poetic. And that's very subjective and very different for everybody. But the thing that I lean on the most is similes. So comparing something to something else. What's a simile that I have? I don't have any similes in what I'm writing right now, which is probably why I'm not satisfied with it. But even something like, it smelled like burning garbage, or the words were stuck at the back of my throat. Similes, metaphors, things like that, adding that into your poem brings it a different dimension. So I will put all of these in the chat. But what I would like everyone to do is to look over what you've written. It doesn't matter if you don't like it. It doesn't matter if it's not finished. It doesn't matter if you don't think it's a poem. And see if you can add in a simile. compare something to something else. The temperature was like the coldest winter's day I'd ever experienced, or a metaphor. My mouth was a chattering spice box. My mouth is a chattering spice box can be a very specific and imagistic way of saying I couldn't stop talking and I wished I would just shut up. There's lots of different ways that you can approach what it is that you're trying to say. Another one is alliteration. Especially if you're going to be reading this out loud, which some of you might like to do, what would it sound like if you had 3 or 4 words that all started with the same letter or that all started with the same sound? When I write about the suburbs, I like to say the sibilance of the suburbs and how they made me what I am. If you're describing sounds in your poem, is there any onomatopoeia that you could add in there? Is there a bang, a crash, a crinkle, a snap? If you're writing about riding down a hill or being up in the mountains, are there any allusions that you could make? Allusions to popular myths about, and most of them are Greek, like Sisyphus or Icarus, and any number of others. If you're writing about your childhood, some things seem so dramatic when you're a child. I keep coming back often to being lost in the grocery store and feeling like I would die, I would perish in the frozen food section. I was never going to get home. That hyperbole, especially when you're writing about childhood, can be very, very impactful and very, very relatable. So I'll put these all in the chat. If there are other literary devices like rhyme, if any of you are writing poems that rhyme, a rhyming poem is very, very, very challenging and always a very, very interesting challenge to set for yourself. So, and if you find this really difficult and you'd rather just write out more of what you have in your head before going in to add literary devices, that's fine as well. So I'll give everyone another 5, we'll put 5 minutes and then I'll check in. Does that sound good? All right, 5 minutes to add in literary devices. How's everyone doing?
I've been trying to transform the original prose story so that it's more like poetry, but it doesn't work.
What is it about it that doesn't work?
It's too sentencey. It's too much like sentences and not reflections without beginning and without end.
Mm-hmm.
I would see this story normally. Just phrases.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to leave it as prose, but read it in some kind of meter, maybe.
That makes sense. Would you like to do that now?
Oh, well, I need to review it and cross out a lot of unnecessary adverbs and stuff.
All right.
Prepositions.
That makes sense. And sometimes you only realize, and sometimes it takes a while. It would be very difficult for any of us to have finished a poem in this one workshop, but it sounds like all of you have something written down and that you have feelings about it and that there are things you would like to change about it. And that makes a lot of sense. Anna, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. I just have a question. I'm wondering about the role of dialogue with spoken word poetry. I'm trying to remember from the video that you showed us. I would love to get your views on, like, does it have a place? or not, or?
I think it definitely has a place. And especially when you perform it,
Mhm.
if the dialogue is in a different language or in a different voice or in a different accent, that's how you set it apart. So in poems where there's dialogue, for me, there's a specific voice that I will use for specific entities or specific characters that I will come up with. But it can also just work with he said, she said, or they said. And this is something, and this is really tied into the performance aspect. So all of us have written down something, all of us have started to fashion it into a poem, but what makes it spoken word is how that will be performed. So as you all go over what you've written, there may be portions where you decide to say, all right, I'm going to pause here, or these few lines are going to be very loud, or I'm going to be quieter here and then pause and then start up again very, very quickly. And there's no exact science to this. This is something that really depends on each individual poet, because you will know if you're describing a moment of panic, that's where maybe you would want to speed up. But another poet might panic differently. Another poet might say when they panic, everything slows down, everything gets very, very, very slow. So it'll be a little bit different for everybody. But to go back to your original question, dialogue definitely has a place in spoken word.
Thank you.
What are some other thoughts or feelings or challenges or questions that other people might have? Yeah.
I'm just wondering, when you perform a poem, the same poem at different times, do you sometimes do it differently?
No, it's always the same. Especially if I like how it sounds. And so then I don't feel any need to change it. Sometimes if I'm working on something and there are too many, and I feel like I'm making too many changes, it means it has to be a different poem and I have to write about something else. Another thing to keep in mind is that all of us are growing and evolving and changing as people and as artists constantly. So there's also a point where you have to decide that something is finished. Otherwise, you'll just work on it forever. So there are points in time where I've said, all right, I have this poem and this is the best that I can do right now. I know it's not the best that I can do for the rest of my life, but I have to tell myself that it's finished. Otherwise, I will never work on anything else ever again. Does anyone want to share the subject of what they're working on, or a specific line, or yes, Catherine? Oh, you're on mute, Catherine. Always happens.
Yeah. I got stuck on the frightening, which
Okay.
made it, it makes me wonder whether it's appropriate to share in a way, because some frightening things are distressing for everybody.
Mhm.
So anyway, but the trouble is sort of when you're seized by something that really grabs your attention and your memory, you can't kind of turn it off and start writing about the daisies that were in the other thing.
Right. That's right.
You
Exactly.
kind of have to follow through, I think.
Would you like to share?
Okay, I will. I hope I can do it. I'll try.
Yeah, you can stop at any time.
Okay, thanks. 4 a.m. I was a zombie, filling a kettle in the kitchen. No sleep. Chemo robbing me of everything. Bang, bang, bang. The back door. My heart kicked hard in my chest. I checked the window. 2 big guys. A uniform. OPP. Pulled my robe tight, hurried to the door. You Catherine Taylor? I nodded, pushed the door open. You have a brother, Michael? I nodded. then something about a body. Oh God, mother. Somebody must identify. My husband came down the stairs. Someone must break this news to my mother. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It takes
Well,
a,
it's a very, one of those memories that once you start thinking about it, it doesn't let you go.
yeah, of course. I feel like that, and that came through very, very well. And it was very short and very impactful. I thought it was wonderful. And it takes courage to write it and to share it. So thank you.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
thank
right.
you.
All right. Would anyone else like to share or ask a question? We could also take another couple minutes for all of you to go back over what you've written and specifically think about if you were to perform it, how would you do that? Does that make sense? We'll do that for 2 or 3 minutes. So, and you can make little notes to yourself in the margins, like this will be louder, this will be quieter. There will be a very, very long pause here. So we'll do that for a couple minutes and then come back. All right, so there are about 5 minutes left. How many of you have written something that you feel you can work on, that you can work on further? There's something there that you would like to further develop. Okay, a few people. All right, so nobody has written something that they like have to scrap or that they feel they have to scrap, which is also, you know, a little bit unusual. I find even in some things that I've written, and my partner is usually the beneficiary of this. This is garbage. I can't work with this. Yeah, you know, on and on and on, which is like the hyperbole of the poet who's like trying to put something together. And then usually there's always some bit or piece of line that's worth it. And I had to go through the hours and hours and hours of stuff that's like fruitless for that one line, but the one line will find its way into something else that will be very, very good. So the most important thing to remember when it comes to poetry is to give yourself permission to write whatever it is that's going to come out. And there's all the voices that say, well, this isn't poetry, or this isn't working, or this isn't right. That's fine. You take what you need from those voices. Like, I'm not sure this is poetry. Okay, well, why don't we go through it and see if we can turn it into something that feels, you know, more like poetry, because poetry is so subjective. The days of, you know, it has to have a meter, or it has to have this, that, or the other thing, especially on the spoken word scene, doesn't exist anymore. There's so many different kinds of poetry, and the genre is constantly evolving. And so poetry is whatever you want it to be. If it's prose poetry, then that's its own kind of poetry. If it's very, very short and very sweet, that's its own kind of poetry. So it's frustrating because it's very subjective, and it's liberating because you can almost do whatever you like. I'm going to put just a few things in the chat. There's a video of one of my pieces that I did a few years ago. I'll be giving a workshop with the Quebec Writers Federation in a couple months, and a number that any of you can text to know what Indigenous land you might be on. You text your postal code, and you'll get a message in a few minutes. Does anyone want to share anything that they've written, or have any comments about the writing experience, or have any questions? Really, anything, any final remarks?
I'll just maybe say one thing, Liana, to your point earlier. I'm thinking about that Jerry Seinfeld book called Is This Anything? You know, comedians always ask that line, like, is this anything? And it's always like the bit. And I find poetry is a bit like that. Like, Yeah, just answer, yes, it is something. Just keep working on it because there's something there.
That's right. That's right. Definitely. Definitely. Yes, Catherine.
I found when I was writing this that I had to listen in my mind to what I was trying to write so that I couldn't put in, I did this, I did that. I wanted it to flow. So there was a different process going on in sort of grouping the phrases and figuring out how the words should work. And so it was a different process in some ways from the way I would just sit down and write a paper poem. So I found that very elucidating is maybe the right word, I'm not sure. But yeah, I learned a lot by trying to write that, even though it was intimidating.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that. That makes me think of, Eleanor, what you were saying, the poem being too sentencey. And I think Catherine makes a good point. Sometimes it's helpful to cut out all the pronouns or to experiment with cutting out all the conjunctions and all the adverbs. And this is something you can do, on a computer or by hand as well. Just practice cutting out different things and then reading it out loud to yourself and seeing how that sounds. Yeah. Yes, Eleanor. And then Katerina, I saw your hand go up. I haven't forgotten about you.
I forgot how to do that electronically, but anyway, I was reviewing the note, when you gave us cues and we wrote something on those cues, the horse, the cube and stuff like that. Every one of them, as I review them, have some kind of strong emotion in them expressed. But the memory, the last piece we did, there's inherent emotion, but it's not expressed the way it's expressed overtly in the short clips. And as I look at the short clips, I could almost have spoken word if I read them if I write them and read them in succession. So I might work on that.
I think that's a good idea.
And turn the story, the last story bit, into just a poignant, less detail of what I did, what she did, where we were, and all of that. And anyway, very interesting.
I think that could work very, very well.
That word "interesting" is terrible, but the process is stirring.
Stirring, yes. Katerina, you were going to say something.
I found this workshop very, very interesting. Poetry has kind of always scared me off. I've always thought I could actually never write down or do anything. This gave me the opportunity tonight to look at it in the different aspects, using the five senses, using metaphors, imagery. It was something that I would never have tackled before on my own. Having this perspective just opens your mind a bit more on what you could actually write. I found it very interesting, and I think I'll do something else, more writing on poetry. Thank you. It was really, really interesting. My topic was on the meeting of a person after so many years. So I was just trying to depict and describe the facial expressions. I was trying to use the five senses. That's what you had given us. Thank you. That was very, very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me to be here with all of you. It's so interesting to write a poem, but then to also try to express how that can happen. Because for some people, it's so, it happens very organically. And for other people, there are steps that you follow. And I know poets who have their list of things that they do, and that's how they build their poems. And others who, write thousands and thousands of words, and then they shave most of it away. And what's left is the poem. And so it really depends on the individual. But and that's, I think, and these are words I'll leave you with, the most important thing for a poet or for any writer is to step out of your own head and onto the page. So to really ignore those feelings of that self-consciousness. You're all by yourself. Nobody has to read anything that you write if you never want to show it to them. And even if you write something really embarrassing or, you know, really bad, it doesn't matter. That brings you closer to writing what it is that you actually want to say. So I want to thank all of you for coming and for participating and for your questions. It was really a pleasure. And I hope
Thank
to
you.
follow
Thank
you
you.
very soon.
Thank you very much, Liana. So I'm going to close officially. Thank you for a really wonderful workshop. It was inspiring, and thank you to all of you for being here today. I have put in the chat the next two workshops, workshop 6 and workshop 7. So workshop 6 is on September 16th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Montreal, still on Zoom, still free, and that is with Euphemia Fantetti. The title is Writing About Family and Yourself. Workshop 7 is on October 18th. It's a Tuesday from 1 to 2:30, again, Eastern Time on Zoom. And that is with Anna Camilleri, Cultivating Voice Within Immigrant Canadian LGBTQ2S Communities. Everyone is welcome, and it is free. And thank you all for being here at Accenti's Countering Isolation with Creativity, a project made possible through the financial support of Employment and Social Development Canada as part of the New Horizons Seniors Program. I wish you all a good evening if you're in Europe, and a good rest of the day. And I look forward to seeing you again at future workshops. Thanks so much for being here, everyone.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.